I always know it's fall when the chestnut tree in front of the church begins to shed her leaves and even to drop her spiky-shelled chestnuts onto our lawn. I dodge them as gracefully as I can on my way in every morning, and I fight a losing battle sweeping the brown and shiny nuts off of our walk for fear that someone might trip over them. But I love them. The tiny orbs are like crystal balls foretelling nature's time of letting go. Lisa and I just returned from the Berkshires, where the tree-covered mountains were just beginning to turn from green to blazing red and fiery orange, and the fields were like yellow quilts of ragweed. Luckily, we brought our allergy pills, and we could appreciate the beauty. In the earth-centered traditions, fall is the time of the equinox, the balance of day and night. In the Jewish calendar, fall is the time for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, which was just a few days ago, is the Jewish New Year. And it is not only a forward-looking observance for the new year and the excitement that brings, but also a retrospective reflection on how we have behaved in the year ending. Have we been our best selves? Have we treated others kindly? What is the state of our relationships? And someone reminded me this week that this personal inventory taking is also the 10th step in Alcoholics Anonymous. Using the language from a few weeks ago, are we in right relationship with those around us? Rosh Hashanah initiates 10 days of repentance, an attempt to clean the slate for a new year and a renewed life. And this culminates in the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement involves admitting our wrongdoings or shortcomings, asking for forgiveness, and most importantly, committing to not repeating our wrongs. This holiday is a recognition that it's possible to turn things around and to make amends in a way that will heal relationships with ourselves, with God, with friends and family, with community, with the world. So I've been reflecting this week about what that means, that deep belief and faith that we have within ourselves the power to turn things around, to heal things within ourselves and our relationships, and the idea that rituals and holidays and places of worship can help us with this. In an article for the UU World magazine a number of years ago, Paula Cole-Jones wrote about reconciliation as a spiritual discipline. And she used her relationship with her sister as an example. She wrote, "A gap had been growing between Lori and me. I felt it, but didn't know how to reverse it. We talked on the phone less frequently, and our conversations did not reveal the trouble between us. And then I said something on the phone one day that just snapped the tension, and Lori unloaded her resentments at me and blew off some steam. It was painful for both of us." Your pain, Khalil Gibran says, is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. And I think of those chestnuts falling and those spiky exteriors opening. Paula listened to try to understand the intensity of Lori's frustration and to really hear what she had to say. She felt herself shift from reacting defensively to making an effort not to judge her sister or justify herself. She made a commitment to work to reconcile their relationship. It was time to move beyond civility and hidden resentment, to restore love and trust. That night, she wrote an email to her sister. "Maybe trust is beyond our grasp right now," she said. "I've spent lots of time thinking about it, but talking about it only seems to make matters worse. I think that trust is one of the paradoxes in life," she said. "We measure it by our failings, which will shape our present moments if we haven't succeeded at trusting in the past. At some point, if trust is to stand a chance, we have to create it and try again and again until we get it right or until we choose to give up." Paula also used that email to express her respect and appreciation for Lori saying what she felt and for going out on a limb with her. Her sister's response was there in the morning. "I forgive you, and I hope that you also forgive my outburst of emotion. I have always loved you and still do. And I hope this opens the doors to further communication and allows us to get to know each other better." We had broken through the barrier of safety by avoidance, Paula says, and opened the door to the feelings and concerns that were keeping us apart. Sharing a history and feeling heard, we each let go of pieces of the past and emerged vulnerable and safe in each other's keeping. "Practicing reconciliation is my personal spiritual discipline," Paula writes. "As a management consultant, I know a lot about helping people work through their differences, but until I embraced reconciliation as a spiritual practice, I didn't realize just how transformative reconciliation can be. Practicing reconciliation means I commit to being in right relationship with people in my life, and when I'm not, caring enough to face unresolved issues and improve the relationship. Now," she says, "as my sister and I walk around the lake together, our favorite pastime, lines from Mary Oliver's poem remind me of our work to reclaim our relationship. The world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese over and over, announcing your place in the family of things." Yom Kippur also recognizes reconciliation as a spiritual discipline. Now, of course, apology and forgiveness are most powerful when both sides are engaged in the process, like with Paula and her sister. But there is power in both apology and forgiveness, even when that is not the case. Remember what we've often said about prayer here at the Meeting House? We aren't sure if our prayers have the power to change things, but we do know that the act of praying changes us. The same is true for apology and forgiveness. We are changed by it, emotionally, even physically. When we are able to let go of our hurt and our shame, the tension leaves our bodies, Our stomachs unclench. Our breathing becomes easier. We move more freely through the world. Our own anger and resentment can dissipate without any action on the part of the person who offended us. And our conscience can become clearer with apology and with forgiving ourselves, even if forgiveness from the other has not yet come. In her book, The Power of Forgiveness, Gina Sharp writes, "Forgiveness is really not about someone's harmful behavior. It's about our own relationship with our past. When we begin the work of forgiveness, it is primarily a practice for ourselves." So let's think more deeply about what she means by our own relationship with our past. Why is that important in our current relationships? Remember that the New Year's rituals of Rosh Hashanah involve both a looking forward and a looking back. Well, sometimes we need to look back not just on the year that has passed, but on an entire lifetime of hurts, disappointments, and responses in order to make sense of the present. A little more wisdom from the experts. Dr. Mona Gustafson Affinito wrote a book called When to Forgive. She says, "The way you react to an offense can be shaped in part by your reaction to earlier offenses. If in the past you suffered a similar offense and never dealt with it, you may find that the old hurt has resurfaced. In this case, you'll need to examine your feelings in order to see how much of your current reaction comes from the present offense and how much comes from the older offenses. When an offense feels like the last straw, it's important that you list the straws that came before." So, reconciliation as a spiritual discipline. Not everyone has to be on board for forgiveness to begin. Offering forgiveness changes us. Pay attention to what is old stuff and what is new stuff. And when we are ready to think about forgiving, it helps to be clear about what our goals are in forgiving. Is it reconciliation? Is it ease of conscience? Is it freedom from anger and resentment? And these are all good goals. But it helps to be clear which one we're after when we're starting to begin to think about saying, "I forgive you." So, like I said, I've been steeping myself in apology and forgiveness this week, and also witnessing how having a community of caring surrounding us can make such a difference as we go through life's ups and downs, navigating right relationship. But I also this week stumbled upon the absolute best example of not right relationship, non-forgiveness that I've ever seen. And I've been dying to tell you about it for days. So I finally get to, and I'm pretty excited. Okay, you've heard about tiny houses, right? And you've heard of fixer-uppers. But have you heard of spite houses? A spite house is just what you might imagine. A home built just for the purpose of being spiteful to another person, like an annoying neighbor or an ex-lover. This is actually a thing. There are examples of spite houses all over the country from hundreds of years of history, and they're still being built. So let me tell you about just a few, and then I promise I will post some pictures of them on our UUMH Facebook page so that you can see them, because you're never going to believe it. It's like a visual history of America's pettiness from coast to coast. I'm not going to lie, a lot of them are in New England. There's one in Boston called the Skinny House. Right after the Civil War, a pair of brothers inherited a piece of land from their father. And while one brother was away in the military, the other brother built a building on the plot of land, a large building, leaving no room for his brother to build a home. The military brother, having not been informed in any way about his brother's plans, wanted revenge. So upon his return, on the remaining sliver of land, he built his skinny house, which directly abuts his brother's house, blocking all natural light from entering the home. The widest part of the skinny house is only 10 feet across, and the narrowest is 6 feet. You can still see this if you go. If you go to Plum Island, off of Newburyport, Massachusetts, there you will see a derelict baby pink house sitting in the middle of a salt marsh with no running fresh water. The New York Times writer Katie Bullock describes it as a lonely, unloved thing looming against a howling sky. Seems like a terrible house in a terrible place, but that was actually the reason why it was built in the first place. As the story goes, in 1925, a woman agreed to divorce her husband on the condition that he build her an exact replica of the home that they owned together. However, she didn't quite specify where the home should be built. And that's where her husband got his revenge, by building it as far away from everything she loved as he could, in a place that he thought would bring her sadness. The house still stands today, and although it's filled with lead paint and asbestos and radon, members of the community don't want it torn down. And it's currently owned by the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge, which for now has spared it from being demolished. So you can see that one too. Who knew that all these people in Massachusetts were so spiteful? Much like Boston's Skinny House, the Cambridge Spite House was built as the result of a bad offer for the land that it sits on. Francis O'Reilly wanted to sell the land because of its small size and offered it to all of the neighbors. When no one would take it off his hands, he decided to make them regret it by building a 308 square foot house on top of it. The structure is still standing today, with an interior decorator living inside who said it is comparable to living inside of a billboard. In her book, When to Forgive, Dr. Affinito reminds us that when we first suffer an offense, we instinctively seek to balance it by hurting the offender back, which would help to restore the feeling that life can be made fair again. But in the long game, this hardly ever helps us to feel better. Paying back the offender doesn't erase the unfairness that you experienced in the first place. The offense that you suffered may have challenged your own core beliefs and trust in a just and fair world. But returning harm for harm hardly ever restores our sense of justice or fairness. One last thing about forgiveness. I think that many of us hesitate to do this work because the word forgive has been yoked to another word, which we are unable to do: forget. The expression forgive and forget has been around so long that it may seem like a commandment, but it's not. And it's wrong. We need to process things in order to move past them. We need to remember what can't be forgotten and react in the ways that are best for ourselves, for those around us, and for justice in general. We need to make changes based on what we've experienced. That's where that other expression comes into play, right? Live and learn. Making a considered forgiveness decision is a long, hard, and painful process, Dr. Affinito says. It would be a terrible waste if at the end of that journey you forgot what had happened, how you felt, what you did about it, and how you managed to end up in a better place. So don't forgive and forget. Forgive and remember. But friends, let's not build houses out of our spite. When we don't forgive, when we hold on to those old grudges and wounds, reliving them and feeding them instead of processing and healing them, we are literally living inside of our own spite houses. And when we build our house to block the light from another's windows, our own windows don't let in any light either. And we live in that darkness too, punishing ourselves with our grudges. So let us practice here with each other, letting go, saying I'm sorry, forgiving each other. We can practice on the small things so that our hearts learn the path to forgiveness. And then we can use that muscle memory to help us with our larger wounds. Here is a place to forgive and to be forgiven. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be.